Somewhere beneath your feet right now, at a depth that no drill in commercial use has ever reached, there is a door, not a metaphor, not a philosophical concept, an actual door. It is 60 feet in diameter. It is composed of materials that do not appear on any periodic table in any chemistry textbook printed in any language on this planet. It has been standing in that location for longer than your civilization, my civilization, and every civilization that came before us combined. And it is opening. I want you to hold that thought, because everything I am about to tell you over the next 40-something minutes is going to try to push that thought out of your mind. Your brain is going to resist it. It is going to throw up all the usual defenses. Coincidence, misinterpretation, government exaggeration, overactive imagination. Your brain is very good at protecting you from things that challenge the comfortable story it has built about the world you live in. But here's the thing about that comfortable story. It has a foundation. And 17 miles beneath the Nevada desert, someone discovered what that foundation is actually made of, and they wished that everything they had ever believed and that they had never looked. My name does not matter. What matters is that the documents are real. The testimonies are real. The people who disappeared were real. And the thing they found, the thing that's been waiting since before the last ice age, that is most certainly real. This is Project Nightfall. This is the Deep Cold Protocol. And this is the story of what humanity found when we dug too deep, listened too closely, and opened the wrong door. Stay with me, because this goes all the way down. The date was March 14th, 1952. The location was White Sands Proving Ground in New Mexico, a name you probably recognize, because White Sands was where the United States had split the atom open 7 years earlier. Trinity Test, July 16, 1945. The desert floor turned to glass for half a mile in every direction. Robert Oppenheimer watched the fireball climb into the sky and quoted ancient scripture. The world was never the same again. By 1952, White Sands had seen things. The people who worked there had long since crossed the threshold into a world where the impossible was just another Tuesday. They thought they were ready for anything. They were wrong. At 3:47 in the morning, on a shift that was supposed to be routine, every radar installation along the western seaboard of the United States detected something simultaneously, not sequentially, not in a sweeping pattern that would suggest an object moving through the atmosphere. Simultaneously, as if the thing they were detecting had appeared in multiple locations at the exact same moment. What they were picking up was not moving through air. It was not a missile. It was not an experimental aircraft. It was not a weather balloon, a temperature inversion, or any atmospheric phenomenon that any trained radar operator had ever encountered in their career. The tracking signature showed something massive, something with distinct and coherent physical presence, moving through solid rock, through the crust of the earth itself, at 12,000 miles per hour. The object, if you want to call it that, was traveling through bedrock the way a hot knife moves through butter. No tunneling, no excavation, no conventional displacement of material, just movement through something that is, by every law of physics we understood then and still understand now, completely impenetrable at those speeds. The friction alone should have generated enough heat to liquefy the surrounding rock for miles. The displacement should have triggered earthquakes across 3 states. The pressure wave should have been detectable from space. Instead, the surface was calm. The seismograph showed the passage, showed the wake of disturbance left behind this impossible moving mass. But the ground above it did not shake. Trees did not fall. Buildings did not crack. It was as if the object understood the difference between moving through rock and disturbing it. As if whatever was down there had specifically designed its method of travel to be invisible to the surface world. Lieutenant Colonel Harold Finch was the duty officer that night. He wrote his report in the early hours of the morning while the incident was still fresh. He was precise. He was thorough. He noted the trajectory, the velocity estimates, the duration of the detection event, the geographic range of the simultaneous radar detections. He noted, with the careful precision of a man trained to observe and record under pressure, that the object's path was not random. It was mathematical, geometrically perfect, following a curve that suggested not just speed, but intention. The thing moving through the Earth's crust at 12,000 miles per hour was going somewhere specific. It knew exactly where it wanted to be. 8 hours after Finch submitted his report, he was found dead in his quarters. The official cause of death, cerebral hemorrhage, massive, instantaneous. The kind of sudden brain event that can strike anyone at any age, more common in men in their 50s, under chronic stress, nothing suspicious in isolation, except for what the autopsy found. The tissue damage in Harold Finch's brain was consistent with one thing, and one thing only: radiation exposure at extremely close range over an extended period. Not a brief exposure, not the kind of accidental contamination you might get from a laboratory incident or a proximity event near radioactive material. The cellular degradation in his neural tissue indicated that Colonel Finch had been standing approximately 3 feet away from an active, unshielded nuclear reactor for 72 continuous hours. There was no nuclear reactor at White Sands. The nearest reactor was 200 miles away. Finch had not left the base. He had not been near any radioactive source. He had not shown any symptoms of radiation sickness. No nausea, no hair loss, no bleeding. None of the signs that would have been obvious to anyone around him. And yet his brain had been cooked from the inside, as if he had been living next to a critical mass for 3 solid days. The neurologist who examined the body added one more detail to his report, a detail that was immediately classified, sealed away from any standard filing system, and would not be seen again for 50 years. For approximately 40 minutes after Harold Finch was clinically dead, his brain continued to show measurable electrical activity, complex pattern activity, the kind of activity you see in a fully conscious and highly cognitively engaged living brain. The patterns were not random misfires. They were structured, sequential. They resembled, according to neurologist classified notes, a person engaged in rapid-fire communication, receiving and transmitting information at 17 times the normal cognitive rate of a human brain. Harold Finch's dead brain was trying to tell someone something. Nobody was listening. To understand what happened next, you need to understand a landscape of 1950s American intelligence, the alphabet agencies, the compartmentalized black budgets, the programs within programs within programs where the left hand was specifically prohibited from knowing what the right hand was doing. It was a world of professional paranoia elevated to institutional art form. And somewhere in the space between those agencies, operating in the gaps where oversight could not reach and accountability did not apply, there was a man known by a single code name, Architect. His real name does not appear in any declassified document, any government employee record, any social security database, or any military service file. He existed operationally. He had clearances that sat above every standard classification level. He had access to programs that senior cabinet members did not know existed. He had, according to fragmentary testimony collected over decades from people who worked adjacent to his network, been preparing for the White Sands event since at least 1947. Since Roswell. You know the public story of Roswell. Something came down in the New Mexico desert in the summer of 1947. The Army Air Force initially confirmed a crash disk. Then the story changed to a weather balloon. Then it changed to a classified balloon project. Then it changed again and again, and each revision was less satisfying than the last, and more carefully crafted to redirect rather than explain. Most people who study the case focus on what came down from the sky that July. The Architect focused on something different. Not what fell, where it fell, and more specifically, why it fell there, because the Architect had already begun to suspect, based on seismic data and deep geological survey results that were nowhere near declassified, that the Rayall story was not above the desert, it was below it, And whatever had arrived in the summer of 1947 had not come from distant star systems. It had come from the Earth itself, or more precisely, from somewhere beneath it. By the time White Sands happened in '52, the architect had been building to a response for 5 years. But the Nevada event, this underground object traveling at impossible speed toward a specific and deliberate destination, accelerated everything. The object had stopped. When radar stations finally lost a tracking signature, the last confirmed location corresponded to a specific geographic coordinate in Nevada. Specifically, it stopped directly beneath the Nevada test site, the same location where the United States had recently begun underground nuclear weapons testing. It had gone to where we were making the most noise, where we were putting the most energy into the ground, as if it were following a signal we had not known we were transmitting. The architect began construction of Facility 7 within months of this event. Here is something the American side of the Project Nightfall story does not like to acknowledge. The Soviets got there first, not to Facility 7, not to the gate, but to the realization that something ancient and impossible was embedded in the deep earth, waiting to be found. In the autumn of 1954, a KGB officer named Yuri Petrov sat across a small table in a Vienna cafe from a CIA contact and handed over 3 photographs. The photographs showed something that the CIA contact, a 15-year veteran of covert intelligence operations, later described as the most disorienting images he had ever seen in his professional life. They showed a sphere, perfect, 40 meters in diameter, sitting in an excavated chamber deep beneath the Kola Peninsula in the northwest of the Soviet Union. And even in the photographs, even as simple black and white images on photographic paper, you could see what made it wrong. The proportions were wrong. The way it sat in the chamber was wrong. The way the light interacted with its surface was wrong, as if the material was composed or was doing something with the light rather than simply reflecting it. Petrov had a message to go with the photographs. He delivered it quietly in a Vienna cafe that was swept for listening devices 3 times a week. He said this: "Whatever your architect thinks he is looking for in the Nevada desert, it is looking for him too, and it already knows his name." The Soviets had found Object Cascade 2 years before the Vienna meeting. They had drilled down to it in August of 1954, reaching an anomaly at 7,300 meters depth that their seismic surveys had identified as a large metallic structure embedded in rock hundreds of millions of years old. When they broke through to it, they found the sphere exactly as the photographs showed it. They did not touch it for months. They studied it, mapped the inscriptions on its surface, mathematical sequences and geometric patterns, and what later analysis would identify as descriptions of quantum mechanical principles that human science would not independently derive for another several decades. They photographed it from every angle. They measured it. They argued about what it was and where it had come from and what they should do about it. Then, on August 8th, they made the decision that people in positions of power so often make when faced with something they do not understand. They tried to take a piece of it. Diamond-tipped drills, small sample, standard materials science protocol, extract a fragment, analyze in the lab, build understanding from the bottom up. 73 hours later, every member of the excavation team who had been present during the drilling operation was dead, not from any conventional cause, not from toxic exposure, not from equipment failure, not from any identifiable industrial accident. They died because they aged. Their bodies ran through decades of biological time in 3 days. Hair turned white overnight. Skin developed the wrinkles and spots of extreme old age. Organs began to fail in the sequence that organs fail when a body has simply run out of years. These were men in their 20s and 30s. Their cells, when examined after death, showed the telomere shortening and accumulated damage of people over 100 years old. Their bodies had burned through a lifetime of biological time in 72 hours. Before the end, every one of them reported hearing a voice, not transmitted through air, not coming through any speaker or communication device. A voice that existed inside their minds, speaking Russian, perfect grammatical Russian, but structured with syntax and relationship between words that linguists later identified as a version of the language that would not naturally develop for centuries. Russian from 1,000 years in the future. The voice said, "You have opened the wrong thing. Time flows differently here. We warned you in dreams. The barrier must not be breached. 17 miles. That is where the answer lies. But you should not seek it. The deep is not for those who have forgotten. The Soviets sealed the site. Entombed object cascade in concrete and lead under the highest classification level in their system. And then they told the Americans, not out of generosity, out of fear, because Yuri Petrov delivered one more piece of information across that table in Vienna. He told the CIA contact what the voice in the sphere had said in those final hours before the last excavation team member died. He said the sphere claimed that humans had found it before, many times. That every time we found it, we made the same mistake. We opened it, and then we forgot. The knowledge lost across generations. The cycle beginning again. 17 times, the sphere had said, this discovery was the 17th iteration. And this time, it said, the consequences would be different. 2 weeks after delivering this warning, Yuri Petrov vanished from his West Berlin safe house. No forced entry. No sign of struggle. No trace of anyone else having been in the room. But carved into the wooden floor with what must have been extraordinary precision and force was a message in a language that no intelligence agency's linguists could identify. Symbols combining elements of cuneiform and hieroglyphics and mathematical notation, flowing together into something that was none of those things individually. For 30 years, that message sat in a classified file, unread. Then in 1984, a cryptographer running the symbols through a new computer analysis system found patterns, structural echoes, mathematical relationships embedded in the spacing between symbols, and a translation emerged. The message from Petrov's floor read, "The descent has begun, 17 miles below the permafrost. We have been waiting, not for you, for the moment when you are ready. But you are not ready. You have never been ready. The barrier weakens with each cycle. Soon there will be no returning to the surface. Soon the deep will claim all." The architect built his monument to either human courage or human hubris in the Nevada desert. From the surface, Facility 7 looked like nothing. Standard military installation, guard posts, perimeter fencing, a handful of surface buildings that any aerial photograph would read as routine administration and support infrastructure. Nothing worth a second look. What was happening below the surface was something else entirely. Facility 7 was designed to extend 17.3 miles into the Earth's crust. Not 17 miles. Not 17 and a half. 17.3. That specificity was not arbitrary, and the reason for it would not become clear for years. The facility was arranged in 73 discrete levels, each one a self-contained environment capable of maintaining its own atmosphere, power, and life support independently. Each level could be sealed. Each level could sustain 500 personnel for 20 years without contact with anything above or below it. Construction began in 1953. It required engineering solutions that did not exist in standard practice, materials developed in classified defense research, drilling technologies pushed beyond anything the civilian world had access to, a workforce so thoroughly compartmentalized that no individual worker understood the total scope of what they were building. The crews at the surface thought they were building a standard military base. The deep excavation teams thought they were working on geological research or possibly a new class of nuclear test facility. Only the architect's small inner circle held the complete picture. By 1961, Facility 7 was operational. But here's the thing that nobody on the construction crew, nobody on the engineering team, nobody except the architect and his innermost circle had been told. They were not entirely building something new. At the deepest level, at level 73, the excavation teams did not carve a chamber out of the rock. They uncovered one that was already there. A structural engineer who worked on Facility 7, speaking 40 years after the events under absolute anonymity, described seeing the equipment manifest for the deep levels. He worked primarily on the upper sections, levels 1 through 60, designing structural support and life support systems. But he saw what was being brought in for level 73. It was not construction equipment. It was archaeological equipment, carbon dating systems, spectrographic analyzers, careful excavation tools designed not for moving rock, but for preserving what was inside it, and something listed in the manifest as a temporal resonance scanner. a device described in its specifications as an instrument for detecting and measuring quantum temporal distortions. When this engineer asked the supervisor what exactly they were digging for, the supervisor looked at him for a long moment and said, "We are not digging down there, son. We are digging up. Something has been buried there for a very, very long time, and we have been hired to uncover it." What they uncovered at level 73 was the gate. Geological dating placed the gate's construction at approximately 47,000 years before present, the last ice age, a period when anatomically modern humans existed but were barely beginning to develop complex tools, when our species was still competing for territory with Neanderthals, when the idea of a civilization sophisticated enough to engineer something like this was not just absent from the archaeological record, but completely impossible to reconcile with everything we thought we knew about human prehistory. And yet, the gate was there, 60 feet in diameter, composed of the same impossible alloy as the Soviet object cascade, an alloy containing atomic structures that should not be able to maintain stability, according to known physics, an alloy with elements that did not appear in any version of the periodic table. And unlike object cascade, the gate was not dormant. The gate was running. It pulsed with energy at precise intervals. Every 17 hours, every 17 minutes, every 17 seconds. The precision was absolute. Atomic clocks synchronized to the gate's rhythm showed no deviation, not a fraction of a second's drift over months of observation. At each pulse, the gate's surface would glow from within, and symbols would appear, mathematical sequences, star charts for a sky that would have been visible 47,000 years ago from Earth's different orbital position, coordinates pointing to specific locations on Earth, but not Earth as it exists now, Earth as it was during the Ice Age. A team of the best scientific minds in American classified research spent 3 years analyzing these symbols. Cryptographers, quantum physicists, mathematicians working at the edge of what the human intellect can process. And their conclusion was both illuminating and deeply unsettling. The gate was not showing the research team where to go. It was showing them where something had already been. The symbols were a historical record, a log of previous activations, a catalog of every time the gate had been used, and every single coordinate it displayed pointed to Earth, not space, not other planets or star systems. Earth itself, but the Earth of 47,000 years ago. Whoever built the gate had been using it to travel, not through space, through time, or through something that connected moments in time across a dimensional space where past, present, and future were not separate events in a sequence, but layers that coexisted simultaneously. In 1961, the research team made the decision to probe the gate directly. They built a sensor package, sophisticated instrumentation for measuring electromagnetic fields, temperature, pressure, radioactivity, spatial coordinates, and temporal markers. They attached it to a tether of carbon filament and titanium mesh, the strongest materials available, capable of surviving extreme conditions. During one of the gate's activation pulses, at the moment of maximum energy output, they pushed the probe through the gate's surface. The surface rippled like water. Despite being solid metal, the probe went through. At exactly 53 feet out, it began transmitting. For 17 seconds, data poured back through the tether. The instruments showed that the probe had traveled zero distance in space. It was still at the same geographic coordinates, still at the same location on Earth. But the radioactive dating equipment on the probe was giving readings consistent with Earth 47,000 years in the past. After 17 seconds, the transmission stopped. The tether went slack. For 17 hours, there was nothing. Then the probe returned, not back through the gate. It simply appeared in the center of the chamber, as if it had always been there, as if it had never left. It had been altered at a molecular level, every atom rearranged with precision, rebuilt from the quantum structure up by something on the other side, composed now of isotopes that were stable but had no known natural or artificial creation process. And it was carrying a message, encoded not in its recording media but in the physical arrangement of its atomic structure, requiring electron microscopes and particle accelerators to extract. The message was in military encryption, specifically a Department of Defense encryption protocol that would not be developed for another 7 years, an encryption system that did not yet exist. The message said, Do not open 17. They're already inside. The barrier was breached in cycle 3. Containment failed in cycle 7. By cycle 12, the integration was irreversible. You are in cycle 17. This is a final warning. Do not open 17. Level 17 was supposed to be storage, long-term equipment warehousing, crates of spare parts, backup systems, nothing that warranted any special attention in the architectural plans or the operational logs. The architect sent a 5-man security team to investigate. September 3rd, 1963. Staff Sergeant Marcus Tillman led the team. Career military, Korean War veteran, multiple classified operations with a track record of maintaining composure in situations that would have broken ordinary soldiers. His 4 team members were selected by the same criteria, men who had been tested by the strange and refused to break. The elevator ride to level 17 took 47 minutes. During the descent, all 5 men reported the same thing. Voices, in languages they could not identify, not coming through any speaker, seeming to emanate from the elevator walls, from the surrounding rock, or from inside their own skulls. And their reflections in the polished metal interior of the elevator car were moving independently, performing actions the men themselves were not performing. Private Chun, the youngest team member, reached up to scratch his chin. His reflection did not move. Instead, his reflection turned its head slowly and smiled. A deliberate, measured smile, as if it had been waiting for him to look. When the elevator opened on level 17, the team stepped into a corridor that did not appear on any blueprint for Facility 7, a hallway extending in both directions. Walls covered entirely with flowing, shifting symbols, the same symbols that appeared on the gate at level 73. But these were not static. They moved, reconfigured, changed from pattern to pattern in sequences that followed some internal logic, as if the walls were processing information. And doors, 17 of them, perfectly spaced along the corridor, identical, made of impossible alloy. No handles, no electronic access panels. On each door, one symbol larger than the rest, pulsing in a 17-second rhythm. Bright, dark, bright, dark. Lieutenant Marsh ordered his team to approach the first door. He placed his palm against the pulsing symbol. The door ceased to exist. Beyond it was a room that did not function as a room. A space where the walls were transparent in a way that had nothing to do with glass or any conventional transparent material. Through these walls, you could see stars, not the night sky viewed from the surface. Stars as seen from between them, a perspective that no human in 1963 had any way of experiencing, that only an observer in deep space would have. In the center of this impossible room was a metal chair. Sitting in the chair was a man in a Soviet military uniform, an anachronism. The uniform was a style that would not be issued for another 3 decades. Clean, well-maintained, the rank insignia of a Soviet colonel. The name tag read Petrov, the same Petrov who had vanished from a West Berlin safe house 9 years earlier. Sitting 4 miles beneath the Nevada desert in a room that could not exist, wearing a uniform that had not been manufactured yet. His eyes were wrong, completely wrong. No whites, no iris. Solid black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Black that went deeper than the physical distance of an eyeball. You could look into those eyes and fall. He spoke in perfect American English, Midwestern accent. Iowa or Nebraska? He said, "You are late. The experiment began without you. We have been waiting for 17 cycles. The others have already descended. Why did you stop at 17? The answer is at 73. But you are not ready. You were never ready. We warned you in dreams. We warned you in the symbols. We warned you through probability itself. But humans never listen. You always dig deeper. You always open the doors that should remain closed." Lieutenant Marsh drew his sidearm, fired 3 rounds. Center mass. Petrov's uniform rippled with the impacts. No blood, no pain response, no injury. He stood from the chair. Each step he took caused his body to flicker, phase in and out of visibility, as if he existed partially in this moment and partially in others, past and future and present overlapping in his movements, like frames cut from a film at random and rearranged. The team ran. The elevator was gone. The shaft sealed with impossible alloy, as if it had never existed. The 5-man team was officially missing for 73 hours. Every level of Facility 7 was searched. No trace was found. No communications. No equipment signatures. Nothing. Then, 73 hours after they had entered the elevator, all 5 men walked through a solid concrete wall in the Level 1 cafeteria. Not through a door, through the wall itself. As if concrete were vapor, they had aged. Visibly, dramatically. All 5 men appeared approximately 17 years older than they had looked 3 days earlier. Medical examination confirmed it was not radiation damage, not any disease process, not any form of accelerated aging in the pathological sense. Their cells showed perfectly normal aging patterns, telomeres shortening consistent with 17 additional years of biological life. Every cellular marker indicated these men had lived and aged normally. They had just done it somewhere else. Someone else. When Marcus Tillman finally told his story, 50 years later, his voice carried the weight of every year since. He described what they had seen in the other version of the facility they had somehow accessed. Level 73 fully operational. The gate expanded, surrounded by a ring-shaped structure miles in diameter, occupying space that should not have fit underground. Things tending to the gate, humanoid in form but moving with mechanical precision, performing maintenance like priests and altar in some ancient and incomprehensibly dedicated faith. And one of them turning to look at the security team, wearing Tillman's face, ancient beyond reckoning, worn down by not years or decades, but what looked like centuries of biological time, speaking without moving its mouth, the words arriving directly in Tillman's mind. You have not stopped the descent. You have accelerated it. In 7 cycles, the barrier will collapse completely. They will return to the surface. 17 million years of waiting will end. You should have stayed at the surface level. The deep is not for you. It was never for you. Then white light, and then the cafeteria wall. After the Level 17 incident, the architect ordered every deep level of Facility 7 sealed. Quantum encryption locks cycling through 17 million combinations per second. Physical mechanical barriers. No access below Level 3 without the architect's personal authorization. Authorization that was granted perhaps twice in the following decade. But the phenomena did not stop. They cannot be sealed away. Personnel at Facility 7 heard voices in elevator shafts, saw shadows moving against the source of the light, found objects and locations where their physical placement was impossible, discovered rooms not on any blueprint, appearing and disappearing on schedules that corresponded to the gate's pulse rhythm. The facility was changing, evolving, becoming something that human engineers had not built and could not entirely control. Meanwhile, in the Soviet Union, Object Cascade, entombed in concrete and lead, had begun transmitting again, electromagnetic pulses at 17-hour intervals. And here's the detail that broke the analytical composure of every scientist who processed it. The pulses from the Kola Peninsula in northern Russia exactly matched in frequency and pattern the signals being detected at the Nevada facility. 2 sites separated by thousands of miles of ocean and continental crust, transmitting synchronized signals that were not crossing the distance through any conventional medium. They were traveling through the Earth itself, through the planetary substrate. The planet's interior had become a communication network. Something was using the Earth like a cable. In 1967, something unprecedented happened. American and Soviet scientists met in Switzerland, neutral territory. No official agenda, no political framework, just researchers from both sides of the Iron Curtain who had, independently and in secret, arrived at conclusions that frightened them badly enough to set aside decades of ideological hostility. The joint project they formed was called Project Deep Cold. Their mission was to synthesize data from 17 underground sites across both nations, to find the pattern, to build a complete picture. Their classified final report reached a conclusion that made everything else seem small by comparison. The structures were not built by visitors from other worlds. They were not the work of any extraterrestrial civilization. They had been built on Earth, by something that evolved on Earth, something that had existed on this planet long before the modern human species appeared. Whatever created the gates and object cascade and the vast network of underground structures that Project Deep Cold was only beginning to map, they had done so 47,000 years ago, during the last ice age, and they had gone underground not to hide from us, because we did not exist yet, but to hide from something else. Starting in 1968, seismic stations worldwide began detecting signals from the deep earth, too regular to be natural. Mathematical sequences embedded in vibration patterns reaching up through the mantle, and these signals were responding to human activity. Every underground nuclear test caused the signals to intensify, to shift, to update, as if something was triangulating our position, learning our location, growing more precise with each data point we unwittingly provided. When geologists analyzed the energy absorption pattern from underground nuclear tests at the Nevada site, they found something that made no physical sense. The explosive force was disappearing, being absorbed by something below. Their calculations of the size of the cavity required to produce this absorption gave a number that was, by every law of geology, impossible. A void approximately 700 miles wide, 17 miles beneath the continental United States. A space that should cause the entire continental crust to collapse under its own weight, unless something was holding it open, unless there was technology down there that had been maintaining this impossible space for an unimaginable span of time. Project Deep Cold reached its final and most disturbing conclusion. The ancient underground network was not a series of isolated structures. It was a support system for an enormous inhabited space. And inside that space, inside a void the size of a small country existing 17 miles below the surface, something had been waiting, dormant for millennia, patient in a way that the human mind cannot fully model, waiting for a signal. And every underground nuclear test we had conducted had been that signal. We had been announcing our existence to something that was already here, already listening, already growing more aware with each transmission we accidentally sent into the deep. The response to this realization was called the Deep Cold Protocol. All deep underground facilities would be sealed. All drilling projects penetrating below critical depth thresholds would cease. The anomalous structures would be buried under additional concrete and lead. All activity at every site where humanity had encountered these impossible technologies would stop completely, freeze, go silent, return to a state of inaction so total that whatever was below might interpret as absence, might conclude the surface was uninhabited, might return to dormancy, named for the Ice Age conditions that had apparently first allowed something to break through 47,000 years ago. A deep cold, a deliberate return to silence. The protocol was implemented in 1969. Facility 7 was sealed. COLA stopped drilling. Every classified underground facility in both superpowers locked down to skeleton maintenance crews who never descended below the shallowest operational levels. For 18 years, it seemed to work. The signals from the deep grew fainter. Strange phenomena at the facilities decreased in frequency. The pressure seemed to ease. The things below appeared to accept the silence at face value, appeared to return to waiting, appeared March 17, 1987, exactly 35 years after the original White Sands detection. At precisely 3:47 in the morning, Mountain Time, the same hour as the original event, seismic stations across the globe detected something that had no precedent in the history of geological monitoring. A disturbance originating not from one point, but from multiple points simultaneously. Every site associated with Project Nightfall, every location where gates or anomalous structures had been identified, all activating at the same moment. At Facility 7, systems that had been dormant for 18 years came online without any human input. Emergency power grids activated. Elevator shafts that had been mechanically locked unsealed themselves. Quantum encryption on the deep levels cycled to open positions. And from level 73, something began ascending. The skeleton monitoring crew that night numbered 4 people. They had been watching gauges and checking seismic readings on a rotation that had been completely eventless for 18 years. Nothing had happened. Nothing had ever happened. And then everything happened at once. The seismograph showed something massive moving upward through facility, not using the elevators. The cars were still stationary in their locked positions, but ascending through the shafts, moving through architecture the way the 1952 object had moved through rock, without disturbing it conventionally. The sound it made reached the monitoring room before it did, metal grinding not against metal, but against something fundamental, a sound that hurt, that blurred vision, and ached in the back of the teeth. Communications were dead, every frequency, complete silence. The elevator doors on level 1, which should have required electronic codes and physical keys to open, simply opened, slid apart. The shaft beyond was dark. Nothing came through, but the temperature in the monitoring room dropped 40 degrees Fahrenheit in under 5 seconds. Breath became visible. Skin went painful. And in the freezing air that sealed underground room, the 4 crew members experienced something that no human sensory apparatus was designed to process. A presence in their minds, not a hallucination and not a voice. A presence, vast and ancient and structured in a way that bore no relationship to any intelligence that had ever evolved on the surface of this planet. And it showed them things. The 4 crew members were found 17 hours later in catatonic states. Eyes open, unresponsive, brain scans showing extraordinary neural activity, processing at approximately 17 times normal human cognitive capacity, not unconscious, not brain damage, fully engaged with something that existed in a dimension medical equipment could detect but not measure. They recovered consciousness 73 days later, when they could speak again. All 4 described the same experience with consistency that analysts found more disturbing than any discrepancy would have been. They described what had been waiting in the deep, what had finally emerged. It was not an alien from another star system. It was not a creature that had arrived from outside the planet. It was human, or it had been human once, in the deep past. It was what humanity becomes after 17 million years of evolution in complete isolation beneath the Earth's crust. After biological adaptation to crushing pressure and total darkness, and a biochemistry shaped by the deep heat and mineral environment of the interior, after technological modification and enhancement across spans of time that make our entire recorded civilization look like a Tuesday afternoon, they had descended during the previous iteration of human civilization, 47,000 years ago, when the surface had been threatened by something they called the substrate. They had gone below to build the barriers, to seal the thing that was pressing against the boundary of reality from outside it, and they had been down there ever since. The surface catastrophe that had driven them underground, the thing they had sealed away, the barriers they maintained, all of it was now at a critical point, because we had been drilling into the infrastructure, testing nuclear weapons against the structural supports, probing with instruments and sending personnel into systems whose purpose we did not understand, but whose function was the only thing standing between the surface of the Earth and whatever existed outside the normal parameters of our reality. We had been weakening the barriers for decades without knowing they existed. This is the part of the story that the people inside Project Nightfall find hardest to explain to outsiders. Not because the information is classified, though it is, but because the concepts sit at the edge of what human language was designed to describe. Substrate entities. They exist in a state that physicists working within Project Nightfall describe as adjacent to observable reality, partially within a framework of matter and energy and causality that we understand, partially outside it, operating in the quantum foam beneath the measurable layer of physical reality, in the probability fields, in the mathematical spaces between particles. They are not alive in any sense that biological science defines life. They do not have metabolism, reproduction, or genetics, but they have behavior, directed behavior, purpose, and that purpose, as far as 47,000 years of observation by the subterranean collective could determine, is to consume consciousness, not bodies, minds, the ordered patterns of thought that sapient brains generate, the structured, recursive self-awareness that human cognition produces. The thing you are doing right now as you process these words, building meaning from symbol, constructing models of concepts you cannot directly perceive, engaging in the abstract reasoning that is the most distinctly human thing about you, that is exactly what substrate entities feed on. A single human brain represents something like a light source to them, Detectable, interesting, a minor meal. Human civilization, billions of minds simultaneously thinking and dreaming and computing and communicating. That is a beacon, a signal visible from wherever substrate entities originate, in whatever dimension or mathematical space outside reality they inhabit. It is, for them, what a city of lights visible from space is to a traveler navigating by landmarks. The subterranean collective's deep structures created what they called quantum noise, interference patterns that masked the cognitive signatures of surface consciousness, made human minds harder to detect from outside reality. Think of it as a biological jamming signal. But our technological development was cutting right through that noise. Every radio broadcast we sent into the sky, every electromagnetic emission from our electrical grid and our communication systems, every particle accelerator smashing matter at energies that briefly touched the quantum foam beneath physics, every quantum computing operation probing the probability fields directly. We were broadcasting our location in frequencies that punched through the collective's interference. And the substrate entities were learning to read us. They had been probing the barriers with increasing frequency since the early 1980s. Small attempts, feeling for weak points, testing the infrastructure that the collective maintained in the deep. On November 3rd, 1987, one of them made a serious attempt to break through. The location was approximately 300 miles east of Bermuda. The entity forced its contact point against a weakened section of barrier for exactly 17 seconds. In those 17 seconds, every human within a 70-mile radius experienced complete ego dissolution. The subjective sense of being a continuous self, the internal narrative that constitutes personal identity, gone. Not suppressed or confused, gone. Sailors on ships forgot who they were. Pilots forgot how to think coherently. People on the water forgot that they needed to breathe deliberately. 347 people died. 2,000 more required permanent institutional care. Their ability to perform basic functions eventually returned, partially, but the core sense of self never came back. The thing that makes a person feel like themselves, continuous across time, the protagonist of their own story, permanently dissolved by 17 seconds of proximity to something their nervous systems could not process. And the entity that caused this had not even successfully breached the barrier. It was a probe, a test, a single substrate entity checking for structural weakness in a barrier that found promising. The Project Nightfall personnel working in cooperation with the subterranean collective looked at that data and understood what they were facing. If the barriers failed, if substrate entities broke through in force, billions of people, not 347, not 2,000, every human mind on the surface of the earth exposed to whatever that 17 seconds near Bermuda delivered permanently, a planet of empty bodies, people who had forgotten how to be people. The negotiations took 7 months. They took place at Facility 7, in a neutral zone on level 17 that had been transformed by some process that the attending scientists could not explain into a space where both surface and deep humans could exist without the environmental incompatibility killing either group. Representatives from the subterranean collective appeared humanoid in basic structure, bilateral symmetry, 2 arms, 2 legs, but the details had diverged across 17 million years of adaptation to the deep. Skin nearly translucent, eyes developed to perceive wavelengths the surface spectrum does not include, bodies compact and dense, built for pressure environments, and a cognitive architecture that surface humans could not engage with directly without specific neurological modification. They told their history. A great surface civilization 47,000 years ago, detection of substrate entities beginning to breach the boundaries of reality, the decision to go underground, the construction of the gates and barrier systems and the vast support network that maintained the underground void, the descent, the long waiting. The barrier system was failing now not because of any flaw in the original engineering. It was failing because surface humanity, without knowing the infrastructure existed, had been systematically damaging it, drilling into support structures, detonating weapons against load-bearing elements, probing and disturbing systems whose function was a difference between the substrate remaining outside reality and the substrate getting in. The collective could not repair the damage alone. They needed materials, technology, and human cognitive resources that surface humanity possessed. Surface humanity could not fight the substrate alone. They barely understood what the substrate was. The solution was Project Nightfall, a permanent cooperation protocol, not a revelation to the public, not a democratic decision made by informed citizens, a decision made in rooms where decisions affecting billions are made by dozens, which is to say, the normal way that existential policy gets determined when the people responsible for it conclude that mass knowledge of the situation would cause a kind of panic that makes the situation worse. 17 facilities worldwide were converted into interface stations. Facility 7 became the primary hub. Selected individuals were recruited for deep interface work. People who tested high for what the collective's analysis called quantum consciousness sensitivity, the ability to perceive and interact with quantum phenomena beyond standard human cognitive range. They were designated depth walkers, humans who could cross between the surface cognitive framework and the collective's network. A depth walker who spoke anonymously about the experience described what it meant to interface with the collective's network. The collective thought in timescales and across dimensions that the human brain was not structured to process natively, but with the right neurological support, a prepared surface human mind could access something that resembled a vast library of living information, books that thought, knowledge that was aware of being known, the deepest archive of human history ever assembled, because the collective had been recording everything that could be detected from the deep for 47,000 years. They also described visiting the deep cities mentally, through quantum entangled states that allowed consciousness to exist temporarily in two locations at once. Civilizations spanning thousands of miles beneath the crust. Architecture that functioned in four spatial dimensions. Art that existed as patterns of quantum probability. Music experienced not through hearing, but through direct mathematical perception. And all of it dying. Slowly, inevitably. The deep environment was changing. Substrate pressure increasing even with the barriers maintained. Resources depleting. The collective's population declining. A few thousand more years, they calculated, before their civilization's collapse became irreversible. They were sacrificing their future to maintain a barrier that protected ours. Project Nightfall has operated in this state of permanent quiet emergency for decades now. The barriers are maintained. The collective coordinates with surface personnel through the interface stations. The substrate probes the barriers and is repelled. Most attempts are minor, contained before they cause measurable damage at the surface level. But the frequency is increasing. The force of each attempt is growing. The people within Project Nightfall describe it the way you would describe a pressure vessel heating up. Each day a little more. Each day the material under a little more stress. Everyone in those 17 facilities worldwide knows the physics of pressure vessels. They know what eventually happens when the pressure exceeds the vessel's tolerance. Some inside Project Nightfall advocate disclosure. The argument is that collective human awareness might actually help, that if billions of people understood the substrate threat and the barrier system, the cognitive mass of that understanding might strengthen the quantum noise field. That consciousness at civilizational scale, focused and informed rather than random and scattered, might reinforce the barriers in ways that no engineering solution can match. Others argue the opposite, that mass awareness of an incomprehensible existential threat would generate exactly the kind of panic and psychological chaos that makes human minds easier for the substrate to detect and consume. That fear is a signal. That terror amplifies the cognitive signature rather than masking it. So the deep cold continues. The silence is maintained. The barriers hold for now, because people will never appear in any public record stand watch in the deepest and darkest places on this planet. In corridors carved through rock 47,000 years ago by something that was human before humanity as we know it existed. In chambers where the gate pulses at 17-second rhythm and the symbols flow and reality is slightly thinner than it should be, slightly more permeable to things from outside it. 17 miles down, 73 levels deep, in the dark where the barriers stand between everything you know and something that exists in the spaces your physics cannot measure. There was a final testimony, provided under absolute anonymity. A person who has worked within Project Nightfall for over 2 decades and who decided that some portion of the truth needed to exist somewhere outside the classified vaults. They said this. If you are hearing this and you have assembled enough of the story to understand what it means, you are probably wondering what to do with it. The honest answer is that there is not much to do. The front line of this particular war is in places no civilian can access. The enemy is something you cannot perceive directly. The weapons being used to fight, it do not exist in any armory connected to the surface world. But awareness is not nothing. The collective believes, and our own theoretical model support, that conscious understanding of the barrier system may contribute something to its function. We are not certain enough of this to recommend disclosure as policy. The risk of the alternative is too catastrophic. But we are not certain enough to say that individual awareness is meaningless. What I know for certain is this. Beneath your feet right now, in the deep where the pressure and heat would kill any surface-adapted creature in seconds, there are people standing watch, not because they are compelled to, not because they have no alternative, because they understand what stops when they stop. They maintain the barriers. They coordinate the repairs. They interface with beings that are human in origin but so changed by time and environment that the connection between us and them is visible only in genetics and in the deep mathematical structures of cognition. They fight a war that humanity does not know is happening, for the right of every human mind to exist and think and dream and feel itself continuous across time, to experience that fundamental human thing of being a self in the world, without having that self consumed by something that exists in the probability feels beneath observable reality. And sometimes, in the deep places, when the barriers are under pressure and the substrate is probing hard, and the quantum noise is thick with interference patterns, and the gate pulses its 17-second rhythm. Sometimes one of them looks up toward the surface they will never see again, and they wonder if it's worth it, and then they go back to work. Because beneath your feet, the door is real, and the watch continues. If you have made it to this moment with me, through everything we have covered tonight, through the desert and the object and the sphere's voice and the dying men and Petrov's impossible reappearance and the level 17 incident and the Atlantic probe and the negotiation that saved the surface world, without the surface world ever knowing it happened, then you are exactly the kind of person who belongs here. Because the eldermurk channel exists for one reason, not for easy answers, not for comfortable reassurance that the official version of reality is complete and accurate and can be trusted without examination. We exist for people who have looked at the comfortable story and noticed the seams. Notice the places where the official explanation does not quite cover the shape of the thing it is supposed to explain. People who hear about the deep cold protocol and think, what else are they not telling us? The answer to that question is everything. Everything. Always. The world runs deeper than the surface level. Always has. The people who have discovered how deep, who have gone looking in the desert and the archives and the testimonies of people who had nothing left to lose by telling the truth, they come back changed. Not always comfortable, not always reassured, but genuinely closer to the actual nature of the reality we inhabit. That is the work we do here together. And if you have not already become part of this community, now is the moment. Subscribe to eldermurk. Ring that notification bell so you are there when the next signal comes through, because these stories do not wait for convenient timing. Drop a comment below and tell me, when you feel that particular sensation, that specific moment at the edge of sleep, when reality seems thinner than it should be, when the world does not feel quite as solid as physics as it is, what does it feel like to you? Because you are not imagining it. That is the one thing I can tell you with complete confidence. You are not imagining it. The gate pulses every 17 seconds. Are you listening? Stay with eldermurk. The deep is not finished with us yet.